The galaxy had one rule that all species followed: don't harm human children. This rule was ancient, passed down from race to race, and respected by all. The humans, with their strong will and unbreakable spirit, had earned this rule. In return, they had peace in the galaxy, or so it seemed, but the peace didn't last forever. Far away from Earth, in the heart of the Galactic Council, a secret meeting was being held. The council was made up of many different species: the tall, long-limbed Zoran, the smooth-skinned Shalari, and the wise, floating Delpharians. The council's goal was to keep peace in the galaxy, but some of the leaders were tired of this rule. They thought humans were growing too powerful, and their influence was spreading too fast. The council's leaders began to argue. Some of them wanted to act against the humans, believing that it was time to push them back. Why should we follow this rule for them? One Zoran leader argued. Humans have become too confident. We need to show them their place. A quiet voice in the room spoke up. It was the leader of the Shalari, a wise being with skin like polished marble. Breaking this rule will bring nothing but chaos, they said, but their voice was ignored. The decision was made. The Galactic Council would break the rule. They would attack the humans, and this time, their target would be the children. The Council didn't know what they had just set in motion. Back on Earth, on the outer colonies, everything seemed peaceful. Children ran through the streets, playing games with their friends. It was a day like any other. Their laughter echoed in the air, and the sun shone brightly in the sky. The teachers in the schools walked through the halls, making sure everyone was safe and happy. They had no idea that a storm was coming. In one of the schools, a young girl named Emma sat at her desk, looking out the window. She loved the view of the tall trees and the green fields. It was peaceful, and she felt safe. But something was wrong today. She could feel it. The wind outside had a strange chill to it, and there was a tension in the air that she couldn't explain. Emma's teacher, Mr. Grant, noticed her staring out the window. He was a tall, kind man who always took time to listen to the students. He walked over to Emma's desk. Is everything all right, Emma? He asked with a soft smile. Emma looked up at him, unsure of how to explain. I feel something's going to happen, she said quietly. Grant chuckled softly. You're just imagining things. It's a beautiful day, and nothing bad is going to happen. But his words felt empty, even to him. Little did he know, Emma's feeling was right. High above the planet, in the deep void of space, the fleet of ships belonging to the Galactic Council approached Earth's outer colonies. These ships were massive, dark, and silent. The fleet's leader, Commander Talros, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. His expression was cold, his mind focused on the mission. He was not concerned about the humans. They were just another species to control. The children, to him, were nothing but pawns in a much bigger game. He had heard stories about humans, how they fought fiercely, how they never backed down. But he believed their strength came from their adults, not from the children. They were weak and unimportant, easy targets for a strike. He gave the order to fire. On the ground, Emma's class was interrupted by the sudden sound of alarms. The peaceful atmosphere vanished in an instant, replaced by a deep, unsettling noise that shook the walls. The students screamed in panic as the teachers rushed to get them to safety. Mr. Grant ran to the window, his face pale as he saw a black shadow pass over the school. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't an accident. It was an attack. Everyone, to the underground shelters. Now, he shouted. The children, some crying, others frozen in fear, ran towards the exit. Emma grabbed her backpack, her heart racing. She had never been so scared in her life. The ground shook beneath her feet, and the sound of explosions filled the air outside. The sky was dark with smoke, and the once clear blue sky was now filled with the shadows of alien ships. The Galactic Council's fleet had arrived. Emma and the other children ran through the halls, led by their teachers. They reached the shelter doors just as another explosion shook the building. The lights flickered, and the sound of screams echoed through the halls. But in the shelter, it was quiet, safe, for now. Mr. Grant looked around at the children in the shelter. His heart was heavy with fear. But he had to stay calm. He couldn't let them see him frightened. "We're going to be okay," he said, though his voice shook. But deep down, he knew things had changed. They weren't just safe here. They had been attacked. The first rule of the galaxy had been broken. In space, Commander Talros watched as the explosions rocked the planet below. His fleet had done their job, striking at the human colonies with precision. The children, the target of their attack, would feel the shock, and the humans would realize that they were not as safe as they thought. The Council would now have control. But what Talros didn't understand was the strength of the human spirit. He didn't know that this was not the end, but the beginning of something much larger. As the fleet turned to leave, the first whispers of the human resistance began. And in the hearts of the children, something had been awakened. They may have been the targets, but they were also the future, and they would fight back. The air was thick with the sound of alarms, the walls shaking under the force of the explosions. Emma and the other children huddled together in the shelter, trying to stay calm. But their faces were filled with fear. The floor beneath them trembled. As another blast hit nearby, it was like nothing they had ever experienced before. Outside, the once beautiful colony was under attack. The peaceful streets, where children had played only hours ago, were now filled with chaos. Ships from the Galactic Council hovered above the buildings, their dark forms blotting out the sky. Below, their weapons fired, destroying everything in their path. The attack had come swiftly, without warning, and now the people of the colony were running for their lives. Grant, still trying to keep his voice steady, turned to the group of children. "Stay here, all of you. Don't move until I return," he said, before rushing out of the shelter. He needed to check on the others, to make sure the adults were doing everything they could to protect the children. Emma watched as he disappeared. Down the hallway, her mind raced, but she couldn't stop the fear that gripped her. She clutched her backpack tightly, the straps digging into her shoulders. What was happening? Why were they being attacked? They had always been safe. The rule of the galaxy was clear. Humans were never to be harmed, especially not their children. But the Galactic Council had broken that rule. Now, everything was different. As Mr. Grant ran through the corridors, the sounds of explosions grew louder. He could feel the heat from the blast on his skin. Even though he was far from the source, the humans were not ready for this kind of attack. They had always relied on diplomacy and peace, but now they were fighting for survival. He reached the control room, where several adults were trying to keep communication lines open. The captain of the colony's defense unit, a tough man named Lieutenant Ray, was barking orders. "We need to evacuate the children to the underground safe zones. The attacks are coming faster than we expected." Mr. Grant stepped forward. "What about the adults? Shouldn't we fight back?" Lieutenant Ray looked at him, his face grim. "We don't have enough weapons or ships to fight them off. We're not prepared for this kind of war. The Council didn't just break the rule, they've declared war on us. And that means we need to protect the children at all costs." Mr. Grant nodded. He understood the severity of the situation now. The children were the future of humanity, and they couldn't afford to lose them. "Then we get them to safety. That's our job, and we'll do it." Back in the shelter, Emma tried to listen to the adults' conversations outside. She could hear the panic in their voices, but she knew she had to stay calm. The other children were crying, and some of them looked to her for comfort. Emma wasn't sure what to say, but she did her best to offer a smile. One of the younger girls, Lily, grabbed her hand. "Emma, what's happening? Are we going to be okay?" Emma looked down at her, trying to find the right words. "I don't know, Lily, but we're safe here for now. We just have to wait for the adults to tell us what to do." But deep down, Emma knew that they couldn't stay in the shelter forever. The world outside was changing, and it was no longer the peaceful place it once was. Outside, the battle was raging. The Galactic Council's ships were equipped with powerful weapons, but the humans were not going down without a fight. Their technology might not have been as advanced, but they had something stronger: the will to survive. Human fighters, many of them veterans from past conflicts, climbed into ships that had been repurposed for battle. They had old weapons, but they were ready to use them, Captain Sarah Hayes, the leader of the colony's defense forces, was among them. She had been through wars before. But this was different. She wasn't just fighting for a cause. She was fighting for her people, for her children. The human fleet launched into space, meeting the galactic ships in a deadly standoff. The ships fired their weapons, the bright flashes of light lighting up the dark sky. The Galactic Council's forces were caught off guard. They had expected a swift victory, but the humans were fierce. They fought with a strength and determination that surprised even their attackers. "We'll show them what happens when they break the rules," Captain Hayes muttered to herself as she piloted her ship into the fray. Back on the ground, the children in the shelter were growing restless. The blasts outside were constant now, and it was clear that the attack was not going to end soon. Emma looked at her friends, her heart heavy with worry. What if they weren't safe here for much longer? What if the shelter was no longer enough to protect them? Lily tugged on her sleeve again. "Emma, I'm scared. What if something happens to our parents?" Emma felt a lump in her throat. She didn't want to think about that, but she knew that the situation was serious. She had seen the fear in the adults' eyes, and she knew they were doing everything they could to keep the children safe. But no one knew how long that would last. "We're going to be okay," Emma said, more to reassure herself than to comfort Lily. "We have to stay strong. The adults are fighting for us. They won't let anything happen to us." But deep down, Emma wasn't sure if she believed her own words. In space, the battle was intensifying. The humans had managed to drive back a few of the galactic ships, but it was clear they were outnumbered. The enemy had the advantage, and it wouldn't be long before they were overwhelmed. Captain Hayes was in the middle of a dogfight with a Zorn warship. Her ship shook as it dodged blasts, the controls flashing warning signals. Come on, she muttered as she fired back. Her ship's weapons were old, but they were effective when used right. She aimed for the Zorn ship's weak spot and fired. The explosion lit up the space around her. One down. But there were many more to go. The fight was far from over. Back in the shelter, the shaking of the ground grew stronger. The children looked around, eyes wide with fear. Emma held Lily's hand tightly, her heart racing. She could hear the sound of explosions getting closer, and the fear in the adults' voices was growing more apparent. The first rule of the galaxy had been broken, and humanity was not going to let it stand. The war had begun, but the Galactic Council did not know the true strength of the humans. They had believed that the attack would be quick, that the humans would bow down or be crushed by the might of the Council's fleets. They had underestimated the humans' resilience and determination. In the heart of the Council, where the leaders of the galaxy's many races met, the atmosphere was tense. The attacks had been successful at first, but now reports were coming in of unexpected human resistance. The humans weren't running in fear as expected. They were fighting back with everything they had. The Council's forces were encountering difficulties. Commander Talrose, who had led the invasion, stood before the Council, his expression tight with frustration. "The humans are not reacting as we predicted," he said. "Their resistance is stronger than we anticipated. Our ships are being destroyed one by one. We underestimated them." A Shalari elder, her pale blue skin glowing softly in the dim light of the council chamber, spoke up. "We must end this quickly. The humans are too unpredictable. If they continue to fight, they will gather strength." Another council member, a tall, slender wraith, added, "We should have dealt with them years ago. Now, we are facing their wrath. It is not too late to destroy them, but we must strike hard and fast." The debate continued, but the council members could feel the shift in power. The humans, once considered weak and insignificant, were becoming a real threat. The council had thought the human children would be an easy target to break their spirit, but they had forgotten that humans would do anything to protect their young. And now, the attack on the children had sparked something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. Back on Earth, the humans were rallying together like never before. The attacks on the colonies had brought people from all walks of life into the fight. Soldiers, scientists, teachers, farmers, everyone was taking up arms. doing what they could to defend their world and their children. They had been pushed to the edge, and now they were pushing back. Captain Sarah Hayes stood in front of a large holographic map of the galaxy. The map showed the positions of the Galactic fleet, their strongholds, and the human forces scattered across different systems. The odds were stacked against them, but she knew that the humans had something that the Council's forces didn't: unity and determination. We might not have the biggest fleet, but we have something they can't fight against, Captain Hayes said, her voice steady and strong. We have our people, we have each other, and we have the will to protect our children. Her words resonated with the others in the room. It wasn't just about winning a battle anymore. It was about protecting their homes, their families, and the future of humanity. The humans had always been good at surviving, but now they were ready to fight. "We're not backing down," said General Alex Carter, standing beside Hayes. "We'll use whatever we have to fight back. The Galactic Council made a huge mistake, attacking us, and now we're going to show them what happens when you mess with humanity." As the humans prepared for their next move, Emma and the other children were still hiding in the shelter. The explosions had not stopped. The sound of war rumbled above them like thunder, shaking the ground beneath their feet. But Emma stayed strong for the younger children, even though her own heart was filled with fear. She had heard the whispers from the adults. They were planning to fight back, to push the invaders out. Emma didn't fully understand the war, but she knew one thing: the adults were fighting for them. They were fighting for her. She couldn't just sit here forever. She had to do something. Lily, still holding Emma's hand, looked up at her. "Will we ever be able to go home, Emma? Will everything be all right?" Emma gave a small smile, even though she wasn't sure of the answer. "We'll be all right, Lily. The adults are strong. They won't let anything happen to us." But deep inside, Emma wasn't sure. She couldn't help but wonder if the world would ever be the same again. Would they ever be able to go home? Would she ever feel safe again? Meanwhile, the humans' fight back was starting to turn the tide. The humans, led by their commanders, began to push the Galactic forces back. They didn't have the most advanced technology, but they used their resources wisely. They fought with everything they had, and their spirit was unmatched. The human resistance had gathered strength. Every victory, no matter how small, brought more people to their cause. The children's survival had become a symbol, a rallying cry for the entire galaxy. The attack on the children had sparked a fire in the hearts of humans everywhere. The Galactic Council had made the mistake of attacking what humans held most precious, and now they would feel the consequences. Sarah Hayes and Alex Carter stood on the Bridge of the Courage, a powerful ship that had been rebuilt with the combined efforts of human engineers. It wasn't as advanced as the Council's ships, but it was quick and powerful. They were ready for the next phase of the fight. "We'll hit them where it hurts," Captain Hayes said, her eyes fixed on the holographic map. "We'll take down their supply lines, their communication networks. We'll make sure they can't strike back. We'll make them regret ever attacking us." The humans were ready. They had learned from their past mistakes. They had learned to work together, to fight for each other, and now they would make sure the Galactic Council never underestimated them again. In the heart of the Galactic fleet, Commander Talrose was growing desperate. His forces were being stretched thin. The humans had fought back harder than he could have ever imagined. Reports of their victories flooded in, and every time a ship was destroyed, Talrose felt the weight of his mistake. "We can't keep up like this," Talrose shouted at his officers. "The humans are everywhere. They're hitting us in ways we didn't plan for." One of the officers, Azoran, stepped forward. "We need to call for reinforcements, or we'll lose everything." Talrose shook his head. "It's too late for reinforcements. We've already lost the initiative. We were too sure of ourselves." The humans had turned the tide of battle. What the Council had thought would be a quick strike had turned into a full-scale war. And now, the humans were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for their children. They were fighting for their future, and as the battle raged on, the Galactic Council's leaders began to realize the truth. Humans would never back down. The battle had only just begun. But the humans were already showing the galaxy something they had never seen before. They were not the weak species that some had believed them to be. They were stronger, smarter, and more determined than anyone could have imagined. The attack on their children had awakened something deep inside them, a fire that could not be extinguished. In the colonies, people who had never fought before were now standing side by side with soldiers, learning how to defend their homes. Engineers and scientists were working around the clock to develop new technologies and weapons. Even the youngest children were playing their part, helping their parents and older siblings in whatever way they could. The people of Earth and their colonies spread across the stars had united in a way no one had ever seen. They were fighting not just for survival, but for their future. They were fighting for their families, their homes, and for the children who had been attacked without reason. Sarah Hayes stood on the command deck of the Courage, staring at the map of the galaxy. The battle was far from over, but they were starting to see some results. The human fleet had pushed the Galactic Council's forces back in several key locations. Human fighters, though outnumbered, were using their ships' agility and speed to their advantage. The enemy was struggling to keep up. "It's working," Captain Hayes said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "We're turning the tide." But Alex Carter, who stood next to her, didn't share her optimism. "We've made progress, but the Council still has the advantage. They'll regroup and strike back harder. We need a plan to finish this." Captain Hayes nodded. "I know. But for now, we keep hitting them where it hurts. We take down their supply lines, their ships, and their commanders. We hit them so hard they can't recover." The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They had always relied on diplomacy, always tried to solve problems with words, but the Council had pushed them too far. Now, humanity had no choice but to fight, and they would fight with everything they had. Back on Earth, Emma had learned that the world she once knew was changing. She and the other children were still in the shelter, hidden away from the violence outside. But she had heard whispers from the adults. They were planning something big. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for victory. The humans were going to push the Galactic Council out of their colonies and show them that they couldn't be broken. But Emma's thoughts were still with the other children. The younger ones were scared. They wanted to know when it would end, when they could go home and feel safe again. But Emma didn't know the answer. No one did. Lily, the younger girl, who had asked Emma about their safety earlier, sat next to her, holding her hand tightly. "When will we be able to go home?" she asked again, her voice small. Emma squeezed her hand. "We will. I promise. The adults are fighting for us. They won't let anything happen to us." But even as Emma said the words, she couldn't help but feel the weight of doubt in her own heart. She didn't want to lie to Lily. She wasn't sure when things would return to normal, or if they ever would. All she knew was that the humans were fighting, and they weren't going to stop until they had driven the invaders out in space. The human resistance was becoming stronger with each passing day. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. They had thought the humans would crumble under the pressure, that the loss of their children would break their spirits, but instead, it had only made them stronger. Sarah Hayes had watched as human pilots, once civilians, now flew into battle with the skill and precision of experienced soldiers. They were not just fighting for their homes, they were fighting for their children, for their families, and for their future. The Courage was in the heart of the battle, taking on some of the most powerful ships in the galaxy. The Galactic Council's forces were still strong, but they were beginning to show signs of weakness. Their ships were slower, their weapons less effective, and their morale was starting to falter. Captain Hayes had a plan. She had received intelligence that the Council was preparing to launch a massive counterattack. If the humans were going to win, they needed to strike first. They needed to hit the heart of the Council's fleet and destroy their command centers before they had a chance to regroup. "We can't wait any longer," Hayes said, her voice firm. "We have to take the fight to them." Meanwhile, Commander Talros and the other leaders of the Galactic Council were realizing the full extent of their mistake. The humans had fought back with more strength and unity than they had ever expected. They had underestimated the power of the human spirit. Talrose stood before the council, his expression grim. The humans are stronger than we thought. Our fleets are stretched thin. We can't afford to lose any more ships. A Zoran officer spoke up. Then we must regroup. We need reinforcements if we are to stop them. Talrose shook his head. It's too late for reinforcements. The humans are already too close to victory. We've made a grave mistake attacking them, and now we'll pay the price. The Galactic Council had made their decision. They had broken the first rule of the galaxy, and they had expected to crush the humans in a single blow. But they had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated the strength that came from fighting for the ones you loved back on Earth. The children were beginning to understand what was happening. They knew that the adults were fighting, and that they were all playing a part in the defense of their home. They didn't fully understand the war, but they knew one thing: the humans weren't going to stop. They had been attacked, and they had fought back with everything they had. The children were no longer just sitting and waiting. They were becoming a part of the resistance too. Some of them helped with communication, some helped deliver food and supplies to the front lines, and others simply provided moral support for the adults fighting in the war. They were all doing what they could to help. Emma stood with Lily, looking out at the stars from the shelter's window. The night was quiet, but the air felt different. There was a sense of hope now, a feeling that the humans were going to win. It's going to be okay, Emma said softly, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. Lily smiled at her, the fear still in her eyes but mixed with a small bit of hope. I believe you, Emma. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The humans had shown the galaxy that they would fight for what was theirs, and they would never back down. They had awoken a force that the Galactic Council had never expected, and it was unstoppable. The war had changed everything. What had started as an attack on human children had turned into a fight for survival. But now, humanity was no longer just surviving. They were striking back. They were determined to show the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. Sarah Hayes stood before the fleet's commanders, her face focused and determined. The fight had reached a critical point. The Galactic Council, once confident in their ability to defeat the humans, was now on the defensive. The Council had underestimated human resolve, and now it was paying the price. We have one chance, Captain Hayes said, her voice strong and clear. We need to hit them hard. Their fleet is already weakened. We take out their command centers, their supply lines. We make sure they can't recover. Her plan was risky, but it was their best shot. The Council's command center was located on a heavily protected moon, orbiting one of their most powerful planets. But the humans had learned to use their ships and weapons in ways that the Council had never expected. They weren't just fighting with technology, they were fighting with everything they had. The memory of the children's suffering, the attack on their families, fueled every action. Lieutenant Ray, a seasoned officer in the human fleet, stepped forward. I'll take my squadron and target their outer defenses. We'll clear the way for the main force. Sarah nodded. Do it. Make sure we have a clear shot at their command center. Back on Earth, the resistance was gaining strength. It wasn't just the military anymore. People from every walk of life were coming together to fight. Engineers, scientists, farmers, teachers. They were all working together to keep the war effort moving forward. In the underground shelters, Emma and the other children had begun to hear more about the progress the adults were making. The attacks on the Galactic fleet were starting to be successful. The humans had begun to push back. Even though the children were still hidden away, they could feel the shift in the air. They were no longer just waiting in fear. They were part of something much bigger. Emma had heard stories of the human soldiers and how they were fighting with everything they had. They were doing it for the children, for their families, and for their future. The same future that had been threatened by the Galactic Council. I wish I could do something, Emma said to Lily as they sat together in the shelter. The sounds of the battle were still distant, but they could feel the tension in the air. Lily looked up at her with wide eyes. Do you think we'll win? Emma nodded slowly, even though she wasn't entirely sure. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that the humans could win, that they could take back what was theirs and protect their future. We will, Emma said firmly. We have to. Meanwhile, in space, the battle raged on. The human fleet, though smaller, was filled with determination. The humans had learned to use their ships in creative ways, using their agility and speed to outmaneuver the galactic forces. The Council's fleets, which once seemed invincible, were now struggling to keep up. On the Courage, Sarah Hayes and Alex Carter watched as the battle unfolded. The human forces were pushing the Council back, but they still had a long way to go. They had to strike at the heart of the Council's power, and that meant taking down their command center. Do you think we can do it? Alex asked, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the battlefield. Sarah looked at him with determination. We have no choice. This is our chance. We hit them now, and we hit them hard. If we don't, they'll regroup, and we'll lose everything. The plan was set. The Courage and several other human ships would make a direct assault on the moon, where the Council's command center was located. They would break through the defenses, destroy their communication lines, and disable their command structure. The humans had learned to work together, using every resource at their disposal. Now, they would make sure the Council could never attack them again. As the human forces moved into position, the Galactic Council was unaware of the attack coming their way. Their forces had been spread thin, and their leaders were struggling to maintain control. Commander Talros, still reeling from his earlier failures, stood before his commanders, trying to keep them focused. We can't afford to lose, Talros said, his voice hard. The humans are pressing harder than we expected, but we can still turn this around. We can still destroy them. But even as he spoke, doubt began to creep into his mind. The humans had already done more than he had expected. They had fought back with a strength he hadn't imagined, and now, as they closed in on the heart of the Council's power, it seemed that the tables had turned. The humans were no longer the weak, small species that had once been easy to dismiss. They were fierce warriors, fighting for everything they held dear, back on Earth. The battle was almost over. The human resistance had made huge strides, and the Galactic Council's forces were beginning to retreat. The attack on the command center was a success. The humans had destroyed the Council's leadership, cutting off their ability to organize and fight back. In the shelters, Emma and the other children felt a sense of relief. The sound of explosions had faded, and the air felt lighter. They had been waiting for this moment, for the adults to win, for the fighting to end, and now it seemed that victory was within reach. Lily looked at Emma with a hopeful expression. Is it over? Emma smiled, her heart full of hope. I think it is. In space, the last of the Galactic Council's forces began to surrender. The humans had won. The Galactic Council had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. The humans had shown the galaxy that they would not be pushed around. They had fought for their children, for their homes, and for their future. And in doing so, they had won the greatest victory of all. Sarah Hayes stood on the bridge of the Courage, watching the stars ahead. The war was over, but the struggle was far from done. There was much to rebuild, but the humans had proven their strength. They had shown the galaxy that they would never back down. We did it, Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with pride. Alex Carter stood beside her. Yes, we did, and we'll make sure this never happens again. The battle was over, but the new era of humanity had just begun. The war was over. The Galactic Council, once a symbol of power and control, had fallen. The humans had fought back with everything they had, and now they stood victorious. The children, who had been the first targets of the invasion, were safe, and the galaxy would never be the same again. On Earth and its colonies, the celebrations were just beginning. People poured into the streets, singing and dancing. The tension that had gripped the world for so long was finally starting to ease. The humans had proven their strength, and now they could begin to rebuild what had been lost. But even in the midst of the joy, Sarah Hayes stood on the bridge of the Courage, staring at the stars. The battle was won, but there was still much to do. The victory had come at a great cost, and the galaxy would not soon forget the lessons learned from this war. Beside her, Alex Carter watched her closely. "You're thinking about the future, aren't you?" he asked. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "Yes. The war is over, but the galaxy has changed. We can't go back to the way things were. We need to make sure something like this never happens again." The human victory had shaken the very foundation of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had been the ruling power for centuries, controlling countless planets and species with an iron fist. Now, they were in ruins. Their leaders had been captured or destroyed, their fleets scattered, and their influence had collapsed. It was a moment of unprecedented change. But Sarah knew that even though the Council had fallen, the galaxy was still full of dangers. There would always be new threats. There would always be those who would try to take advantage of the humans' newfound power. But this time, the humans were ready. They had proven that they could defend themselves, and now it was time to set a new course for the galaxy. Back on Earth, the leaders of the newly formed human alliance were meeting to discuss what came next. The war had left scars, but it had also opened doors. The humans had earned the respect of the galaxy, and now they had the chance to shape the future. But how would they do it? Sarah sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the faces of the leaders from Earth's colonies and other allied species. They had come together, united in their victory, but now they had to figure out what to do with their newfound power. "We've proven that we can defend ourselves," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "But that's not enough. We need to build a future that's better than the one the Galactic Council gave us. We need to create a galaxy where peace is possible." Her words were met with nods of agreement. The humans had shown the galaxy that they could fight, but now they had to show that they could lead. They had to prove that they could build something stronger than the broken system the Council had left behind. "We've learned that we can't trust the old power structures," Alex Carter added. "We can't rely on others to protect us. We need to form alliances with other species. But we also need to stand strong on our own." The room was quiet for a moment as the leaders considered his words. Finally, one of them, a Zoran named Rillick, spoke up. "The humans have proven themselves. Your victory was unexpected, and now the galaxy must respect you. But there are many factions who will try to fill the power vacuum left by the fall of the Council. If you want peace, you must be strong enough to enforce it." Sarah nodded. "We'll be ready for whatever comes next, but we won't do it alone. We'll build alliances with those who want peace, and we'll make sure that the galaxy understands that humanity will no longer be pushed around." The humans had won, but they knew the work was just beginning. There would be no easy path forward. The galaxy was full of powerful species, some of which had their own agendas, and the humans had just made enemies of the Galactic Council. But now, humanity had the strength to stand on its own, and that was something the galaxy had never seen before. Sarah Hayes looked out the window of the Courage, her mind focused on the future. The stars seemed brighter now, no longer overshadowed by the threat of the Galactic Council. She knew that humanity had changed the course of history, but she also knew that there was still much work to be done. "Alex," she said quietly, "we've changed the galaxy, but now we have to make sure we keep it safe. We have to ensure that no one ever breaks the first rule again." Alex nodded. "We will. We've shown the galaxy that we're not just survivors, we're leaders." Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had risen. The old powers had fallen, and a new era had begun. The war had been won, but now the true test would be to build a lasting peace on Earth. In the streets, the people cheered, celebrating their hard-won victory. The children who had once been the target of the Galactic Council's attack were now safe, and they were the symbol of humanity's strength. The children were the future, and the future looked brighter than ever before. As the celebrations continued, Sarah Hayes stood alone on the bridge of the Courage, watching the stars. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that humanity had proven something incredible. They had proven that no matter how strong the enemy, no matter how powerful the opposition, they would never back down. They would always rise, and they would always fight for each other. "We've won," Sarah whispered to herself, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. But the real work starts now. And with that, the new rule of the galaxy was set. No longer would anyone harm the human children. For the galaxy had learned that when humanity was pushed, they would strike back with everything they had. The future was theirs to shape, and they would do it together.